Another lode is set in Michigan's Upper Peninsula in the late 1800s during the heyday of copper mining there. And in the story, a Jory, who's almost 18, has long dreamed of going downstate to the University of Michigan. That's his vision peg, but he didn't know about the Valentine part. His parents had fought over whether he could go or not, but his pa finally went out and he got to go downstate, Ann Arbor, for one semester. But then his father died and he was called back home and his mother wouldn't let him return. And she wrote the university that he wouldn't be returning. Since he was not yet 18, he couldn't overrule her. Besides, he had to stay home to support the family because they were destitute. Among other money-saving devices, Catherine, the mother, had let Eliza, the 4-year-old, let her nanny go. But begged by his little sister to see her beloved Helena, they finally make a trip across town for the visit. A lot of dropsy here. The neighborhood was certainly a vast improvement over the squalor of their previous living quarters. When they were settled with their cold tea, Jory could hold his curiosity back no longer. "It's a nice home you have here, Helena. I'm glad Providence was good to you." "Providence, is it? Your father, that's who it was." Jory didn't think he heard right and stared at her dumbfounded. "It's just as amazed we were," she smiled. "Begotten, but Jesus, we never would have dreamed in a million years your pa would be so generous." "I don't understand." "Nor did we. Shortly after the will was read, he was notified that your father had left me a tidy bit for her long and faithful service to the family, is what it said. She looked up with pride. "What do you think of that, lad?" "Splendid," was all he could say. "How else do you think we got this place?" She fanned herself with her handkerchief. "It weren't the leprechauns that brought the bag of gold, believe you me." She sat rocking, musing. Pa lost everything, you know. His stock failed. He hoped to get Helena to open up some more. "Failed, is it? Like the sun fails to set?" "No, lad, you got that all wrong. Your father died a rich man, he did." "My mother, we don't have anything except what I earn. That's why I couldn't go back to the university." "Is it now? Is it indeed?" He thought she looked angry, dabbing at the perspiration on her forehead. "You're staying home because that's where your ma wants you, and that's the long and short of it, lad." Something in his mind began to churn, but he said, "Mother took all the stock certificates to the lawyer, and they were worthless." Helena just shook her head and watched him carefully. "Maybe you've heard enough for one day." "No, go on, please." "Well, this much I'll tell you. One day when your ma was out, your pa asked me to witness the will he'd written. 'Read it first,' says he to me, 'before you sign it.' 'I can't read, not that kind of fancy language,' says I. 'Then I'll read it to you,' says he, and he did. He said something about feeling bad he hadn't done more for us in our hour of need, he did. That was when my Daniel lost his arm in the mine, and I was at such 6s and 7s I lost the baby I was carrying. Oh, such a time it was. Anyway, he said he wanted to make it up to us. Saints be with us, you could have blown me over. Of course, I had no idea it would be coming to us so soon, or so much, God save us all. But it weren't more than 3 weeks later he took sick and died." "I see," said Jory. Ugly pieces he didn't want to see were coming together. "And as for you, lad, I'm sure you know your brothers got us some when they turned 18, mostly company stock. But your father wanted you to get your education. That's what himself said to me. And it was right there in the will that you would get your sum in cash when you turned to the age of 18. "Are you telling me that my mother—" "Believe what you like, lad. Believe in the fairies if it suits you, and put milk out for them so they won't take your firstborn like we did in the old country." His head was in a swim. Could this be? Had his mother imprisoned him with lies all along? "Helena, would you mind looking after Eliza for a while longer?" "Mind? It would be all the saints blessing me at once." He raced along the dirt roads all the way to the lawyer's office, stirring up a cloud of dust which lodged on his sweat-covered skin. He prayed he wouldn't be too late. He was determined to ferret out the truth. He had met Mr. Wilson a few times at the house. The lawyer received him warmly. "I was just closing up, lad, but come in, come in. I'm sorry to keep you, but it's important." "That's all right. How are you, and how are you doing down at the university?" Jory was out of breath, and the sweat was pouring down his back. "I'm not in school, Mr. Wilson." "I'm sorry to hear that. What can I do for you?" Jory was so afraid he was out of line, he had to shove his hands in his pockets to keep them from shaking. "I wonder if I might see a copy of my father's will," he said as strongly as he could. "I don't see why not. I was surprised you weren't at the reading. Your stepbrothers were here." I didn't know about it." Mr. Wilson raised his eyebrows. "That's strange. I thought perhaps you'd gone below to the college." Jory shook his head. "How old are you, lad?" "Not quite 18. "Well, that could explain it, I suppose. Being a minor, your mother may have decided not to include you. That was her prerogative, of course." Mr. Wilson fished around in the files and finally produced a folded legal document. "I can't let you take it, but you're welcome to come back tomorrow and read it." Did my father leave me anything?" "Oh, yes, same as your brothers. Let's see here. Mr. Wilson, sir, do you know at the time of his death if there were actually funds available to be dispersed as stated in the will?" "Yes, of course. Why do you ask?" "Did he leave my mother enough to live on?" "If she lives to be 100. Jory thought his heart would surely give out. "Are you certain?" "I am. His stock, you see, is doing very well." Jory left the lawyer's office in a fury, determined to confront his mother. He tore through town, dodging crowds. Why were there so many people choking the walks and the streets? Then he heard it, the sound of drums and horns. He'd forgotten all about the circus parade. It was coming right down Hancock Street. As the hot August dust choked him with its unrelenting blast, he bolted through and around bystanders and participants alike, colliding with a clown and practically trampled by an elephant. Finally, searching the house, he looked wildly about for his mother, first on the ground floor, then upstairs. He burst into her room, but she wasn't there. Retracing his steps, he caught sight of her in his little sister's room. She was on a bed with only a towel covering her. He bellowed, "What are you doing in Eliza's room?" "What's wrong with you? It's the coolest room up here." "Get up. You know right in Eliza's room," he panted. "Of course I have. The whole house is mine." "Get out. Where are your clothes?" She looked frightened. "I've just had my bath." "Get out." She rose, grasping the towel in front of her. "Jory, are you mad?" "Everything. It was all a lie. You don't need my money. You have enough to last forever." She trembled, and for a moment he thought she might faint. She stammered, "I had to tell you that to keep you here. Please try to understand, Jory." He grabbed her arms, and the towel fell to the floor. She tried to pick it up, and he kicked it aside. "Jory, let go of me." He lifted an arm and held it in contracted force, ready to strike. Finally, he willed it to his side, advancing toward her. "Deceit, that's all it's been. Lies, schemes, deception. Have you ever been honest about anything?" He shook her, pushing her backwards, and he shouted, "Have you? Do you think I enjoyed lying to you? I had no choice." She backed into the rocking horse, then fell on it. The picture of his mother's naked body on Eliza's rocking horse was macabre. He pulled her away from it and pushed her on the bed. She grabbed him, causing him to lose his balance and fall on top of her. She tried to hold him there. "Jory, I love you more than anything. You know that. Come to me, precious." Her body twisted against his. Something inside his head was ringing and spinning. Like a snake, her arms coiled around him, drawing his head down to her. If he stayed a moment longer, the unthinkable would happen. Suddenly the ringing stopped, and he felt a cord snap. The picture shifted slightly, and he saw her not as a goddess of beauty and power, but a desperate, pathetic human being resorting to anything to hold him in her keep. Any desire he'd ever had for her vanished. As she grasped him ever more tightly, he forcibly uncoupled from her arms and rose. He picked up her towel and tossed it to her. "Get dressed and get out of this room." His clothes were wet through with sweat. Exhausted, he went to the back of the house, dipped a bucket in the rain barrel, and dumped it over his head. The coolness helped him collect his thoughts. One thing at a time. Eliza, yes, she was still at Helena's. He must go get her. Thank God she hadn't been home to witness the terrible debacle in her bedroom. He used the long walk to try to piece together his mother's deception. Acting. It was all play acting. The crying over the table with the worthless stock certificates. The china she traded to get the player piano. How she made as though they barely have enough to eat if he didn't forfeit all his salary. And her engagement to Mr. Markle, probably cooked up to make her soiree with him seem more respectable. The more he remembered, the sicker he got, until halfway across town, he threw up in a ditch. When he finally reached Helena Street, he could see her on the walk waiting for him. "Tell me, lad, what happened to you. Thanks be with us, you've a face on you like a devil drug you over hot coals and back again." Only inarticulate noises came out. Finally the dam broke. "That's it, lad. Let it out. Let it all out. Faith and begorra, you've had a fright." Much of it, the image of his naked mother, his shame, he couldn't tell her. Finally he managed to say, "She lied to me, Helena. She fabricated all those stories about having no money just to keep me home. I thought as much. I knew she'd stop you from going one way or the other, lad. It wasn't my business to inquire how." The tears streamed down his face. "She lied to me. Everything she preached about trust and honesty. It was all a charade." She looked at him sympathetically. "I think you just grew up today." Thank you.